Last one, then we can all take a break. Is preventing bad design just as important as encouraging good design? Our next speaker is Kirk Westphal. He is an urban researcher and film producer based here in Ann Arbor. You might recognize him as the creator of the film Insights into a Lively Downtown, the #1 planning and design video on YouTube. So all of you should check it out. He's got a brand new film called The Great Street Toolkit, which was just reviewed in Planning Magazine, and he serves on the Ann Arbor's Planning and Environmental Commissions. His talk is titled Insufficient Fun, How Banks Rob Your Downtown. Please welcome Kirk Westphal.
Ever since the financial panics of the early 1900s, it became customary for banks to build their lobbies much bigger than they needed. That way, even if it got crowded, it would never feel panicked or make people think there was another run on the bank. And that wasn't so bad back then. Banks were usually beautiful buildings and people needed to go there pretty often, but that's not the case today. Now, I'd like you to leave here tonight seeing not one but two crimes being committed in this photo. And I would contend that what this thief is about to steal from the bank doesn't even come close to what underused banks like this steal from the vitality of your downtown. Now, tonight I'd like to share with you, one, why too many banks are bad for your downtown. Two, what you can do to break free from bank overpopulation. And three, how you can justify taking action against landlords that may not have your downtown's best interests at heart. So why are banks bad? We know they're already too big by design, and they don't generate much foot traffic, even before the advent of ATMs and direct deposit, they weren't doing so well. But the double whammy is when you get this, right? This is an extreme case, okay, but really the best scenario you can hope for in a bank is a bland storefront with maybe some blinds, ads for free toasters, and if you're lucky, a silk flower or two. But the last reason banks are really bad is that they're dead at night. You need an active nightlife in your downtown if you want your downtown to thrive. And banks are problematic in that every single one displaces a business that's more likely to be open past 6 o'clock or actually generate pedestrian traffic. And at some point, you get too many of these together, it just becomes not worth walking down a block. Let's think about why people would choose to go to downtown. Even though it's expensive to park, you might have to walk through 100-degree heat and walk several blocks to your destination. For me, it's what's between your car and your destination that matters. It's interesting things to look at. And the more times you have dead spaces like banks, the more reasons people have just to go to the strip mall and park out front. So it turns out that a lot of cities really don't like banks. But the good news is that you can have banks, we need them, but they don't have to kill your street. And lots of cities do this. And there are two ways to control banks. The first method is to have some kind of spacing requirement. In Chicago, if you want to rent to a bank, there can't be another one within 600 feet of it. For reference, up on Main Street here, we've got 5 banks along the same 300-foot stretch. The other way of controlling banks is limiting the amount of percent of street frontage that you can occupy with a bank or an office. Now, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the term liner buildings. This is a new town center near DC where the parking structure is in the back and up top, but it's lined with a cafe and a restaurant, so it hides the use that's no fun to walk by, so it doesn't fill the street. And lots of cities are applying this to banks. So we know banks are bad, you know there are tools to deal with this, so how do you justify taking action? You know, it smells a little anti-free market, right? So normally I'd say, yeah, that sounds right, but there are these things called externalities. An externality, many of you know, is when the side effect of something you do impacts somebody else negatively without hurting yourself. The whole reason we got into land use regulation is because, you know, pollution from factories. This polluter may not really care about the health of the people downwind, so we have to have some kind of regulation. In the same vein, a property owner who rents to a bank and kills the foot traffic all around them is imposing a negative externality on his neighbors. So a couple of years ago, Ann Arbor actually proposed implementing a so-called active use ordinance to limit how much of a street can be taken up by these dead uses. And I wondered what the big deal was, so I asked a couple of shopkeepers who seemed to be cut off from the busy part of Main Street up here by an office and a bank. And I asked the first person, if they cared about being next to an office and a bank. And right away they said, it's terrible. They said, it's so busy on the next block, and then people come up to the corner and they see empty storefronts and nothing going on, and they turn around and they don't come to my store. The next person I spoke to, similar thing, said, it's interesting you're asking me because just last week I was following a student, showing his parents around town, and we got up to my corner, and he said, well, Main Street kind of ends here, let's turn around and go down the other way. And then he said it felt like a kick in the stomach. And this really matters to these businesses. So the problem is that property owners, as you might expect, don't really like the idea of being told who they can and can't rent to. I debated this in an article a couple years ago. It was called The Socialist. That was fun. One blogger wrote, the granola and tofu fascists that should pack their bags and move to a country where the government can control the minutiae of their lives. Well, they continue to pack their bags. Long story short, the property owners stormed City Hall and killed this proposed ordinance. They apparently have a little more clout than mom and pop business owners in downtown. So ironically, the granola and tofu people are still packing their bags for fascist places like New York and Chicago, which is really shameful. A couple of you might recognize this from 2 years ago. This is an ad for a grand opening of a lifestyle mall up on near Route 23. The best of the city is coming this fall. Okay, and as a planner, this creeps me out a little bit. I don't agree that it captures the best of the city, but I think these places are really good at eliminating the worst of the city. For example, you would never see a big bank in a successful mall. Okay, and take a look at Briarwood. Can you find there's a bank here? Can you find where Briarwood's bank is in this plaza? Look at the planter to the right. You see a little bit of red, and there we go. They allow the most useful 10 square feet of a bank in their mall, and I can just picture them saying, yeah, put the rest of the ugly building up on Main Street because they don't care. So tonight, I hope I've shown you why banks are bad, the problems that they create, what can be done, and why we should. And I'm really not a control freak. I love downtowns because of their organic feel. But like tending any successful garden, you have to control the weeds. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Kirk. We'll take a break for about 15 minutes or so, have a drink, cool down, use the restroom, whatever you need to do, and we'll convene shortly. Thank you.